JSD Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. I would like to pay my obeisances to His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj and His Holiness Radha Swami Maharaj. We are on 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, titled as Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness, having 35 verses. And we are on the 5th section of this chapter, which will discuss about Prakriti, Purusha and their union. So these are the other answers to the last two questions which were remaining. We have already discussed about Kshetra, Kshetragya, Gyan and Geya. And now today we will be discussing about Prakriti and Purusha. So this is a quick revision of the previous session. Like somebody would like to read.
Process of acquiring knowledge: humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, serving a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control. Process of acquiring knowledge, 13.9. Renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. 13.10. Process of acquiring knowledge: detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness. 13.11. Constant and unallied devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people. 13.12. Accepting the importance of self-realization and philosophical search for the absolute truth.
Thank you, Rajesh Babu. So actually, Krishna said that to acquire this knowledge, we have to cultivate certain saintly qualities. And these were the qualities he mentioned in these verses from 8 to 12. So we should aspire to cultivate this. And out of this, he said that the most important is constant and unalloyed devotion to Lord Shri Krishna. And side by side, if we develop this unalloyed devotion to Krishna, these qualities will automatically manifest in a devotee. But we should also aspire to cultivate these qualities. And then in 13.13, he said that by 13.13, he said that by knowing the knowable, you will achieve the liberation. Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. So from this verse, he started explaining about the spirit, the jiva, which is the object of knowledge. And from these verses number 14 to 18 were discussing about the qualities of a super soul, who is also the object of knowledge. So soul and super soul, both are geya. They are to be known. And by knowing this, what will happen is mentioned in the 19th verse. So like we discussed about the super soul, that it pervades everything. It is everywhere. And it is the original source of all senses, but he is beyond the senses. He is like a maintainer of everything, yet detached. So we cannot divide him. Although he's present in all the living entities, he's situated as one, and he is the source of light in this material world. Because here sun and moon are required for illumination. It's not like the spiritual world where Krishna's effulgence itself illuminates the spiritual world. And in the 19th, it was said ultimately that only Krishna's devotees can understand about this body, the knowledge and the knowable. And then by this knowledge, they can attain to Krishna's nature, that is Sachidananda. Today, we will talk about Prakriti, Purusha and their union. Their union means how they came in contact with each other. This is the first verse. Anybody like to recite this verse?
I'll read Mataji. Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Vidyanandi Ubhavapi Vikaramscha gunamschaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavam. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Bhagavad Gita 13.20.
Thank you, Rajesh. So, Prakriti Purusham Chaiva, Vidya Anadi Upavali. So, Prakriti and Purusha, both are beginningless. So, how to understand this? We have already discussed before also why material nature is also called as beginningless as well as eternal. Only except Kala, the four components which are discussed, except Karma, the four components which are discussed in Bhagavad Gita are all eternal. So, material nature and living entities are talked here about like they are beginningless. Anadi. Anadi means we cannot detect their origin when they came into this existence. Okay, so like we know that Krishna is the origin of both material nature and living entities. Both are his energies, and if both are his energies, their qualities will be similar to energetic. That if Krishna is eternal, then material nature and living entities also becomes eternal, and so we cannot trace out when they came into existence, both the material nature and the living entities, and how they became associated with each other. And now here it is also talked that beginningless also means it's indicating towards the eternal nature of the material nature, and we have discussed that the components of the material nature like earth, water, fire, they are always there, and material nature's components according to the laws of energy are never destroyed. They only become manifest and unmanifest. So whenever like in the body of the Mahavishnu, from the body of Mahavishnu we have studied in Bhagavatam, in the form of Mahatattva, the existence, the material nature starts, and then Pradhana, and then all the senses and sense objects, all these things. So So, so both of them are beginningless and eternal in nature. So material nature, like we always give the example that if this building is there, building can be demolished at any time. So building came into manifestation and it can be demolished, but it is made up of some components, some elements which are provided by the material nature, and they are always there. Okay. They are never finished. So though we say that this material nature is temporary and these material things are temporary, they will be get destroyed, but the principle behind that is only its manifestation is temporary. It itself is not temporary. And now in the second line, it is told that the transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. We know that material nature is the cause behind all these three modes. These three modes arises from the pradhana, and then we have studied the detail of how sense objects, senses, sense data all come into picture. And because this material nature gives us the body. Okay, this body is also made up of all these 8 elements provided by the material nature, and we see various transformations in this body. So all these transformations and the 3 modes of material nature are born of material nature. And we have discussed about these transformations. What happened when the body is given a form, a shape, then we get attracted to that shape or the form, because the material elements in themselves are not attractive. Suppose we have some bricks and sand and all these things, they will not attract us. But when they are given a shape in the form of a building, it becomes attractive. Similarly, to make this body, material nature is providing us with certain elements. And it takes the form of a beautiful girl or some different species, different animals are there like peacocks and all. So after it is given a form, it becomes attractive. And that attraction is the main cause of bondage for that living entity. Now, when the living entity is put into a particular body of a particular species, what happens? Whatever transformations are happening in the body, because the living entity is identifying itself with that body, he suffers. His mind identifies, like his mind is experiencing happiness and distress, his mind is experiencing some anxiety, that we feel that we are involved in that, the living entity is involved in that, because at that time he's conditioned, he's bound by that body, being in that body, and he has to act according to that body. So this is the difference between the jiva and the living entity. Now, we have given some references from the previous chapters where it was shown that material nature is, the source of material nature is Krishna. This was in the chapter number 7, where we studied that these 8 elements constitute my separated material energies. So material energies are also coming from Krishna, and they are called as apara Shakti or inferior energy of Krishna. And beside this, the living entity also is originating from Krishna, but it is the superior energy. And this superior energy, what is desire? It's desire to exploit the resources of this material inferior nature. But when it gives up this desire and it wants to, it gets that seva vrati to serve Krishna. And that time, what it will do? It will use the same material energy to serve Krishna. So there will be transformation in the consciousness when the living entity turns towards Krishna. Now, instead of exploiting this material energy, it will use this in the service of Krishna, what we call as Yukta Vairagya, utilizing everything which is being given to us, even this body or this laptop or our house or our, everything which we have material, now we will utilize in the service of Krishna. So the living entity is sometimes called as marginal energy also. It has a nature. If it goes down and associate with the inferior nature, then it degrades itself. But when it associates with the superior energy, Krishna, with the internal potency of Krishna, then it elevates itself. And this was like in 7.6, all created beings have their source in these 2 natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, for certain, I am the origin and the dissolution of both. Because we have seen that everything is a combination of spirit and matter. We discussed this before also. Like if we know that as Paramatma, Shiva Vishnu, Krishna is pervading each and every atom of this material universe. So we can say that that atom is also a combination of spirit and matter because Paramatma is there. Similarly, if a building is being made, a building cannot be made without the hands of a person acting behind it. So that way, building can also be seen as a combination of material and spiritual energies. And O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon Krishna as pearls are strung on a thread. So behind both these energies, their combination and their transformation, Krishna is there. So this is the diagram which we know that soul is there, then subtle body is there, and the gross body is there. And we have discussed this, that body becomes the field of activities, the karma kshetra, when a soul gets a body. And there are 2 knowers of the body, soul and the super soul. And we discussed the difference between those 2 also. Like super soul is present in the bodies of all the living entities, and he is the supreme knower because he knows about all the bodies. But a soul can know only about his body, and that too also not fully. We cannot know how the digestion is going on, how breathing is going on. So that is our limitation. We are limited, but super soul is unlimited and infallible. And this body is the field of activity, and it is made up of material nature, like 8 elements. And the individual soul that is embodied, what it does, as long as it is embodied in the body, it tries to enjoy the activities which are happening in that body. Okay. Whatever we do with our body and senses, we have been given this sense and mind, and we desire doing something. And whatever activity we do, that will in turn give us happiness, distress, sometimes it gives us pleasure and pain and all these things. So now, because this chapter is talking about Purusha, so Purusha, who is Purusha? Purusha is again the living entity. But here it is said that Purusha as living entity is only a tiny Purusha. The main Purusha is Super Soul or the Paramatma or the Supreme Lord, which is called as Param Purusha. And in 15th chapter, we will study about that Purushottam yoga in 15th chapter, where mostly about this Param Purusha will be discussed. But what happens, the living entity is also called as a Purusha here, a tiny Purusha, because he is trying to imitate the Lord. We, when come into this body, we think ourselves as enjoyers. We think like now we have been given this body and we want to enjoy to the limit possible. And because of that enjoying mentality, the Purusha is also called as, the living entity is also called as Purusha. For example, if a father is a doctor and there is a small kid of 5 years, sometimes what he will do, he will take the stethoscope of his father and try to imitate his father. But by imitating, he doesn't become doctor. Similarly, we all living entities are trying to enjoy separate from Krishna. And that is the main cause of our bondage in this material world. Okay. And we know that living entity is the category of his energy. We are energy, but the super soul is expansion, personal expansion of Krishna. So that is the difference between the Param Purusha and the tiny Purusha. Now, we have been put into this material world and we have discussed this, what was the purpose of the Lord to put us in this material world. And there is a history like why we were put in this material world, because we wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. We turned our face away from Krishna. And we all have a minute independence, free will. Using that free will, we decided to enjoy separate from Krishna. So Krishna says, Krishna told, okay, I will make this universe for you. And he created all the facilities in the form of material nature and placed all these living entities in this material nature. But his main purpose was to take us back to him. And because of that only, as Super Soul, he accompanied us. He is so merciful, he never left us alone. So when we desire to came in this material world, he came along with us. So that if we listen to the Paramatma in the heart, we can again turn our face towards Krishna. So that is the sole purpose of this material creation. It is a chance offered to the conditioned soul to go back to Godhead. And for that purpose itself, he also provided us with Vedic knowledge. He gave us Vedic scriptures like Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, so that we can get a help from these scriptures. So to help understand this eternal relationship with Krishna, he gave us the Vedic principles. So this is from the purport of this verse. Somebody would like to read this?
I will read. Both material nature and the living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of the superior energy. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. But due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within the material nature.
So we have already discussed this part. So Prabhupada says in the purport, it really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord had come in contact with material nature. It happened due to our own desire. But Supreme Lord Krishna knows, however, that how and why this took place. In the scripture, the Lord says those attracted by the material nature are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. Once we are placed in this material nature, we all know that we have to struggle for existence. But we should know it certainly from the description of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also productions of material nature. All transformations and variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. So it is here told that the material nature provides us different types of bodies, and according to the body, transformations took place, influences are there, so many things are there which keep changing in this material. But the spirit or the living entities are always the same. Why? Because qualitatively, the quality of the living soul is always pure, whether it is in the body of a dog, hog, or a human. The quality of the soul never changes. Only the different types and varieties of species of living, the body has been given to these living entities. So, like we can um, like understand it with an example, like the elements to make up this material nature or material body is provided by the Prakriti or the Durga Devi, material nature. But the different forms, like bodies are awarded. You will get a body of demigod, or you will get a body of dog, hog. These are given by Paramatma because he's the Brahmaji, because he's the secondary creator. Now we have also discussed like what type of a body one will get. It depends upon the desire of that living entity as well as his karmas. For example, if I go to a market and I want to purchase something, so there will be various sections up to 1,000 range, up to 2,000 range, up to 5,000 range. I may have desire to buy an item of 5,000 rupees, but my pocket doesn't allow it. Similarly, if we have not done karmas to get a good body, then Brahmaji will not award us that body. So we may desire, but along with desire, they will see what karmas are in account. Good karmas, bad karmas, and according to that, the body will be decided. So this way, we get a particular body and we get bound by that body. We have to act by that particular body. If we are in the body of a dog, we have to bark. We cannot do anything else other than that, because now we are bound by the three modes of material nature. So we have discussed this. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Purusha, he is the master, he is the controller, he is the enjoyer, he is the proprietor and the maintainer of this entire cosmos. But the Jiva, the living entity, is just an energy of Krishna. He is not the master or the controller, but still Jiva is called Purusha because of his mentality of being the master, that enjoyment. Thus, the word Purusha is used for both the Supreme Lord and the living entity in this chapter. Now, verse number 21, again, the concept of material nature, this Prakriti is being discussed. So, verse number 20, 21, and 22 mostly discusses about Prakriti. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. Why it is so, called as nature is said to be cause of all material causes? Here it means that nature is the cause of the body we get and the associated senses and sense objects. All are because of the nature only. Whenever we see a beautiful some scene like sunset or a beautiful girl and all these things, these bodies are products of material nature. So nature is behind all these manifestations of the material nature. Now, living entity is called as the cause of sufferings and enjoyment. So this can be understood with the help of an example. Suppose we are watching a movie. So on the movie screen, different scenes are going on and we are watching. But what happened at that time, whatever is happening in the movie, it affects us. If somebody is crying, we start crying. If somebody is laughing, we start laughing. So here we are separate from that movie screen, but still whatever is going on the movie screen is affecting us. because we are at present observing that movie. Similarly, a living entity also observes the activities of this body and its relations and its all manifestations. It is seeing some sense objects, and then it develops a desire to enjoy that sense object. And if he gets that sense object, he will be happy, he will enjoy. But suppose he is not getting that enjoyment, he suffers. And this is happening because in conditioned state, we ourselves are identifying us with that body. That is the main cause. If we stop identifying ourselves with that body, the pain and sufferings, the pleasure and pain associated with this body will not affect us. Whatever may be going on in that movie, if I'm sitting and I'm blind, suppose, and I'm not seeing that movie, then it will not affect me. A blind person is sitting and seeing the movie, nothing will happen to him. So because he's not identifying with that movie. Similarly, if we are in this body and if we stop identifying, we will not have that suffering and enjoyment. At present, what happens? Whatever our mind is saying, because we identify ourselves with this mind, which is a subtle part of the material nature, we suffer and enjoy. So that's why it's told that living entity is the cause of his various sufferings and enjoyment because of his desires, because of his desire to enjoy, of mentality to enjoy. That is the main cause. So different manifestation of body and senses are due to the material nature only. There are so many species and the varieties are creations of this material nature. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. His material and happiness distress are due to his body alone. Body is the effect of the senses. The senses are instruments for gratifying the desires. And now the sum total body and the instrument senses is offered all by the material nature. Because this body is comprised of so many senses. And then these senses are looking for sense objects. The sense objects are also products of material nature. And they affect us. And the living entity is blessed or damned with circumstances according to his past desire and activity. Depending on his activity and his desire, he will get a particular type of body. And then he got bounded by the three modes of material nature. Until unless we come to Krishna consciousness, we will not look towards Krishna and we cannot transcend these three modes of material nature. We have to act within that arena of material nature. We cannot act beyond that. So we say, no, we have to transcend these three modes, then only we can go back to Krishna. 22 is like the following verse, which also speaks about getting different bodies. The living entity, material nature, thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. Like in the movie screen, whatever we see, whether it is a sunset scene or some fighting or something, they are a combination of some colors we can see. Some colors are being depicted on the screen. Similarly, in our life, in this material nature, there are three modes of material nature, and the different combinations are there of the sattva, rajas, tamas, which we are trying to enjoy, and we are trying to associate with this material nature. We don't want to get out of this entanglement of this material nature because it looks so attractive to us. We are attracted to it, and with that attraction comes the enjoyment, and with that enjoyment we suffer and we enjoy. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. And it is not limited only to enjoyment and suffering. He creates certain impressions in his mind. He creates certain desires in his mind. And he do some activities with that body. And that will decide the next body for him. Whether it is like he will get a good body of a demigod or some hog body or something among various species. This is decided by the activities he is trying to do with this material body. The change of the dress is due to attachment to material existence. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into such undesirable circumstances. And under the influence of material nature, the living entity is born sometimes a demigod, sometimes a man, beast, bird. Or this is going on. In all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of the circumstances. Yet we should understand that we are under the control of this material nature. We are conditioned by this material nature. We are not the master. In the purport, Prabhupada says, therefore, one has to rise above these three modes and try to be situated in the transcendental position, that is Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another. And that change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. How we will come to a transcendental position? By hearing. So again, Prabhupada has stressed the importance of hearing from scriptures, hearing from authorities. That hearing itself will, what will happen with that? The living entity will lose his long cherished desire to dominate the material nature. And gradually and proportionally, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he will come to enjoy spiritual happiness. So his bhog vritti, enjoyment, he will change to seva vritti, towards God, just by hearing. Now, after talking about the Prakriti and the living entity in these three verses, now in this verse, Krishna talks about the real Purusha, that is the Param Purusha or the super soul. Somebody like to recite this verse?
I'll try, Mataji.
Yes.
उपद्रस्तानुमन्त च भर्त भोक्ता महेश्वरः परमात्मेति कापि उक्तो देहेऽस्मिन् पुरुषा para. Yet in this body there is another, transcendental enjoyer, Bhakta, who is the Lord, Bharta, the supreme proprietor, Maha Ishvara, who exists as the overseer, Upadrasta, and permitter, Anumanta, and who is known as the super soul. 1323.
Thank you, Prashant. So, this is so different from living entity. Living entity is like to be enjoyed by Krishna. It is bhunkata, but super soul is the transcendental enjoyer. Actually, we say na ki Krishna is the only enjoyer, and everything else is to be enjoyed, because everything else is his energy, living entity as well as material nature. So they are meant for his enjoyment. But the problem where it arises, when we think ourselves as enjoyer, which we are not. And it is said that Krishna is the super soul is only the Lord. He is the supreme proprietor of everything. He is an overseer and permitter, Anubanta. Like he sees. We have discussed like as two birds are sitting on a same tree. One of the bird is soul, and the other bird is super soul. So whatever activities we are performing in this body and with the senses which we have got, Paramatma is seeing it. So he is the overseer. He does not disturb the living entity until and unless the living entity turns his face towards him. So when he will keep guiding from inside, like we sometimes say, na, Paramatma is speaking from inside. But what we have, our tendency is to ignore that. A sound will come from inside that you should do this is good, and this is bad. But what we will have, that we will shut down the mouth of the good dog and we will feed the bad dog. And who is that good dog? That is the speech of the Paramatma which comes from inside. So Paramatma guides us from inside, as well as we know Bhagavad Gita and books are there which guide us from outside. But in a present condition state, we don't want to listen to both of them. That is our situation, our bound situation. So Krishna, like super soul, sees all our activities which we are doing, and then he's the permitter also. Why he permits? Because he doesn't want to interfere with our free will. He patiently wait. He wait till we turn our face towards him, and if we turn our face towards him, then he will ask the material nature also to facilitate us towards him. He will guide us from inside. He will give us so many inspirations that we can slowly and slowly increase our devotion to him. This is the position of the super soul, who is the real Purusha, a well-wisher. We have discussed this, that Krishna is the only well-wisher. Bhoktaramya kitapsam sarvalokam heshwaram suhidam sarvabhutanam gyatvam shantim mrachati. So he wants us back to the spiritual world. These are the qualities of the super soul discussed in this, who is the real Purusha. In 24th verse, now Krishna concludes. He again says the same thing. One who understands this philosophy concerning the material nature, the living entity, interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. Now the 14th chapter will be totally about these modes of material nature and how they are acting on us. So if we understand this philosophy, we know that the main purpose of this Jnana section of Bhagavad Gita is that once we come to the knowledge, then that knowledge should lead to surrender to Krishna. So Jnana leading to Bhakti. So here Krishna is saying the same thing. If we understand this philosophy, then what will happen? We will surrender to Krishna. And when we surrender, we will go back to him. We will attain liberation and will not take birth here again, regardless of our present position. Because we have already discussed this, that once we have done this mistake of enjoying separate from Krishna, and when we come to this material world, and then we come into Krishna consciousness or devotional service, then we, when we go back to Godhead, then we will never desire to come back. So that is our position. Now in 25th verse, Krishna says that this super soul can be perceived. We have discussed this, and Bhagavad Gita tells us about 3 ways, 3 paths to perceive the presence of super soul, or we can say it is the yoga ladder. So it is discussed in this verse also that some people perceive the super soul through meditation. That is Dhyan Yoga. So Dhyan Yogis, they want to meditate on the super soul within them. So that is one of the method they can know about the super soul. But it is said that these Dhyan Yogis also, without a touch of devotion, cannot achieve liberation. Others are through cultivation of knowledge. Is speaking about the Jnana Yogis. These Jnana Yogis, because they have come to a knowledge that we are different from the spirit, they have come to this knowledge that matter is separate from spirit, and that's why they want to cease their activities. They say that this material senses, sense objects, this nature will bind them, and that's why they keep them aloof from them, and they cultivate on the Atma Tattva because they are knowledgeable. And through this path, they want to perceive the super soul, or they want to realize Paramatma realization position, because they are only they first try to realize the soul within themselves, and then it's because it's a gradual process, and finally when they come to the stage of this Jnana Yoga, they can perceive the soul. Or sometimes we say these Jnana Yogis, they want to merge with the Brahma. There is their aim. But still, these are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as parts of liberation. Somebody can take the steps, or somebody can just directly take a lift through Bhakti Yoga and realize the Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the third category we all know are the Nishkam Karma Yogis. Still others through working without fruitive desires. So these are the 3 paths which can help us to perceive the super soul within us. But again, in this section also, Krishna concludes that bhakti is the highest, and that bhakti, how we get? By hearing. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So sometimes we may think, oh, this Sankhya Yoga, this Gyan Yoga, this is not for us. Who will study all these deep matters of Sankhya Yoga, difference between soul, super soul, and the Prakriti and the union? How to understand all this? This is not possible, right? So Krishna is saying, okay, no problem. You just hear from authorities. And just by the process of hearing, if you start worshipping me, then by just this tendency of hearing and then worshipping me, you can transcend the path of birth and death. There is no need of doing Nishkam Karma, Gyan Yoga, Dhyan Yoga. You can directly come back to me. So we know that again and again, though this chapter belongs to Gyan Yoga, Krishna is highlighting the importance of hearing and bhakti. And the final section of this chapter will be like Gyan Chakshu, the eyes of knowledge. Again discusses how when we get this eyes of knowledge, we can attain Krishna. So this is the difference between Prakriti, Purusha, how they came into union, why they are formed and why the living entity is enjoying, and how we can go back to God. So if somebody wants to discuss something.
Mataji, I have one question.